Anybody who follows Tesla knows that full self-driving is a big, big deal. Sometimes, maybe. Depends on the analyst, depends on the expert, depends on the armchair expert of the day. And I happen to have one such armchair expert in front of me. It's Randy Kirk, and we're going to discuss my question. And that's definitely quality. My big question, which is FSD, what is it worth today? I'm Brian. Welcome to My Tesla Weekend. Randy Kirk, how are you?
I am so good that it's hard to imagine being better.
Yeah, that sounds great. So, FSD, you've got some hands-on experience with it. It's in your car. Your wife uses it now. Tell me all about it.
So, I try to be as fair and honest as I can about something like this. I paid the big bucks. Well, fortunately it was only $8,000 when I bought it, but still in all, we wanted to use it. And so we've worked on it and worked on it. We've tried to use it. And we are old. Well, not my wife. She's much younger than her, age. But anyway, we would both qualify as the grandpa, who might be a little more nervous about the car doing odd things. And plus, I don't drive hardly at all, maybe about 50, 60 miles a week on the Tesla, and then my wife drives 6 miles each way. So not a lot of driving, not a lot of opportunity to test it. And so over time, she's been like, oh no, never mind. I tried it again today, never mind. Just in the last couple of weeks, she's like, you know what? Getting better and better, really getting to the point where I can trust it. Except for getting off the freeway at the right off-ramp. That seems to be the biggest problem that we're running into. But there you go. Yeah, that's where we are on it. I'm currently not using it because, again, I drive one trip to church each week, 25 miles each way. That's pretty much it.
So the $8,000 at the time you bought it was an amount that you considered reasonable for what it could do at the time and what you believed it'd be able to do before too long.
And because I was a fan.
And because you're a fan. And because you had $8,000.
And because I could afford that extra in the monthly payment.
So speaking of old people, I posted a picture of my wife and myself.
You did?
With
She's lovely.
on X.
I know. You're way above your
no one ever says that to her. And it's starting to get to me. My dear friend Kelly said, Brian, how old is your wife, you dirty dog? I said, she's 4 years younger than me. She goes, oh, she looks 24 years younger. I said, I'll tell her, she'll be delighted.
Yes, but you won't.
And she was. Yeah. She was delighted. Yeah. She looks great. When we had little kids, people would come up and compliment me on the good behavior of my sons and daughter. It's like, oh. I've had a hard life, Randy. You just don't know the troubles I've seen. Now, my question, though, is, what is FSD worth today? Not counting the fact that it's going to be level 4, level 5 any minute.
Right.
I can't count that because I've been hearing that song for a while, and it's starting to wear out the record is what it's doing. And what we're seeing from all the other players, no matter how close they get to that final 9, to that last digit of pi, they find that it's irrational and it just keeps going. Cruise has lost their permit to operate in the state of California and has chosen to suspend their operations nationwide. Waymo is still moving forward. Other companies have Uber and Lyft both gave up completely, sold off the divisions for scrap. Haven't heard from them since. In China, we have other players who are aggressively moving towards autonomy. We don't get the kind of news from social media out of China that we do in other countries. So I don't know where they're at necessarily. So leaving the future, leaving the next versions out of it, because we don't know when they're going to come or how much better they'll be. Because we've always heard, Elon has said, I have the bleeding edge version and it's great. You won't believe how great it is. And then we hear in his biography that he's screaming at the FSD development team that my car tried to kill me. It's like, yeah, well, that's the version we have, and I've had similar experiences. So my question is, as it functions today, if that's as far as it's going to get, let's just pretend that's just it. What's it worth? What would you?
So as a sales and marketing guy, okay, I'm always going to look at it from this. I try my best when I'm selling a product or analyzing a product for a client to put myself in the shoes of the buyer at the moment, not ivory towerize it and say, well, I think it should be worth this. No, if I was now today having to make a decision, what decision would I make? And I will tell you that there is a psychological difference between 8 and 12,000. Okay, I mean, even though we've had a lot of inflation in the last 3 years, there's a big difference in your mentality about making an $8,000 decision, even though it's a big number. But at 12,000, that's over 10. So now you've got a psychological barrier there to the idea. Okay, 15, that puts it in even another class. So bringing it back to 12. Yeah, I maybe they need to bring it to 990 or something, 9,900 to get rid of that psychological barrier. Number two that has changed since I bought mine is you can now get it for $200 a month. And you can turn it on, turn it off as you're using it or not using it. So knowing that we've now gone 4 years, 5 years with promises that haven't been delivered on, I might be more inclined to go with the $200 a month and risk the fact that if I ever want to buy it, it might cost me a lot of money someday to buy it. But that might be a risk that I'd be willing to take, given that we still don't have a finished, a ready to drive from the backseat version. So that would weigh heavily in my decision-making process. And then finally, I think the thing that would be of concern to me is, I might have had more time to think about it. I know personally I have, and I know my wife has, personally think about, would we ever actually rent it out? And the answer in our family is absolutely not. So, and again, I'm just going to use us as the example. We have a Cybertruck on order, and that's for her. She's the one that wants it. I've never driven a truck in my life. I'm a sports sedan car guy. Almost all of my cars have been sports sedans. And I'm not interested in a truck, but she wants to get the Cybertruck. Well, then the Model Y will probably become mine. Would I rent out my Model Y? Absolutely, all day long. So there's a difference, see? She says there's not a chance in the world. Well, then if she's making the decision, she's not going to pay $12,000 or $15,000. She might not have even paid the $8,000 in order to have the advantage someday of being able to put it out for rent. In my case, I've already rented my cars out on Turo, several of them, and did quite well, thank you. So yeah, it'd be a no-brainer for me. I would absolutely rent it out.
So when it was at 15,000, I thought that was just insane. That was bonkers. 15,000 is what I paid for the van that I traded in, and I bought it when it was 2 years old. That's a whole additional car. Not a new car anymore, but
yeah,
when they first, that's just too much. If FSD was $6,000 right now, I would try to find the money to get it. I certainly would have rolled it into the payment. I would have done that. It would have been uncomfortable, but it'd be more comfortable than trying to find it now. I don't think 6,000 is coming back. Certainly not before it becomes commoditized to the point where manufacturers are giving it away just to try and move units. And that day may come, maybe in even 5 or 10 years, but definitely in 20, I think. So the question is, where between, and 12,000 to me might as well be 15,000. That's just too much. That's a good down payment on a car even as expensive as a brand new mid-range car.
Yeah.
So somewhere between 6,000 and 12,000 is the sweet spot, and I just don't think 12,000 is it. What we've got today, I do not I have not had good success with it. And I know some people have and they love it. There are channels that are able to use it all day and never have any problems. But some of those people are using cheat devices, and I'm not using a cheat device. Well, if you see a video where someone's got their hands off for the entire drive, they use a cheat device.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have already got my first strike, Randy.
Oh, my
And I've
goodness.
only driven 229 miles, and most of those were not with FSD
They are.
even enabled yet. And what happened, I had, not only did I have my hands on the wheel, but I was also doing the scroll button, and it was still beeping. And I'm like, what do you want from me? And it just got so, it was, oh, I was losing my mind. It was so frustrating. And you can argue that I'm too dumb to know how to drive, but if I, having had experience with this before, having used it hundreds and hundreds of miles on other people's cars, am still struggling with it, that's a barrier to a lot of people.
Sure.
And I'll tell you, if I had paid $12,000 and already had a strike, I would be at the service center reading them the riot act, because you're telling me you're going to take away from... Do I get a refund? Because you don't. You don't get a refund. And I understand where they're coming from.
Sure.
They have to deal with the people who are using cheat devices. They have to deal with the people who are using it improperly and in an unsafe manner.
Right.
But you've got a camera looking at me, and my hands are at one point it said, put your hands on the wheel. And I'm showing my wife, Tina, I'm like, look, I'm shaking the wheel as much as I, and then you disengaged. You want to tell us why? I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to tell you something. I'll tell you that much. So for me, I will continue experimenting with it. I will make videos about it. But it is not ready for prime time. I'm not sure which version I have. It's a 23 dot, I want to say 23.11 dot something. I'm not sure. But it is.
Well,
yeah.
the day that it becomes drivable from the back seat and it's fully operational and everything's cool, everything changes. I've already said that I believe that they'll have a two-tier system. They'll have a
Right.
tier for people that are not renting it out, and they'll have a tier for people that are renting it out. I don't see how they can do it any other way, because nobody's going to spend $80,000 to get the FSD if they're never going to rent it out. I mean, that would just
Right.
be nuts. So I think there'll be a two-tier system, and I think they'll figure all that out over the next months until FSD is finally out. But just in general, yeah, would it be worth $12,000 or $15,000 if it was 100% operational? Yeah, I don't think there's a problem.
I would agree with that. If it could drive, non-drivers around,
Yeah.
people who are
Even older than me.
vision impaired, or Pat, my oldest son will, I assume, never drive. But it would be nice if he were able to have that kind of freedom.
Right.
And yeah, but I just don't think we're there yet. What I'd like to know in the comments is, how crazy am I? How wrong am I? I'm willing to hear it. I'm willing to hear it. What would you pay for it? There are some people for whom, if it was free, they wouldn't use it. There are people I know who have it on their car, and one spouse will use it and the other won't. And that's basically saying there's no price for me. And there are other people who would say, I'd pay $500 a month. So the number's in there somewhere for everybody. Tell us in the comments, how much would you pay? I do want to give a big thanks to Randy Kirk, best-selling author. He's got some links in my description. See, you monkey around with your camera. That's what happens. That's what happens. You don't get to advertise when you're being a wise guy, huh? So, Randy, thank you so much for taking your time. Pleasure as always. And, everybody else, like, subscribe, do the usual things, and stay tuned, stay juicy. And I can't wait to hear from you clever robots on the next one.